Okay, welcome everyone, and to all of you guys that have joined already. It's a real pleasure to have you all today. For those of you that aren't muted, please make sure to mute yourself. Thank you. So welcome to these series of workshops on nature-based solutions. I'm extremely excited to be able to officially kick off the first workshop today. And we've got an amazing team behind that I will be introducing in just a bit. So these workshops are really there with the aim of supporting the business community on better understanding what are nature-based solutions, why they're important in terms of business risks and resilience, and also how can business start applying nature-based solutions? What is some of the practical knowledge that they need, and also the understanding around some of the global criteria for designing, verifying, and scaling up nature-based solutions projects. And so to do that, we're going to be doing a total of 3 workshops. Today, we're launching the very first one, which is going to be an introduction into nature-based solutions. The second workshop on 24th of June will be on the IUCN Global Standard for Nature-Based Solutions. And then finally, workshop number 3 will be looking at financing and ensuring nature-based solutions. So again, I'm excited to start. I'm excited to host this first workshop, which will be really providing an introduction into nature-based solutions. Just flagging again that we will be repeating the session in the afternoon as well. And I'd like to take the opportunity here to really thank all of the different partners that you can see on the slide that have taken part and helped shape these workshops. These workshops were really born out of a realization that there was an increasing demand from the business community to better understand nature-based solutions. There's an increased interest as well from the community on these type of solutions, but there's still a lot of confusion around them. And so again, hopefully today we can help clarify some of that. So again, a big thanks to PEDAR, Partnership for Ecosystem Disaster Risk Reduction, UNEP involved as well, WBCSD Nature, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, Oppla, and I shall also highlight here that these workshops were also able to take place thanks to the support from the European Commission. So a quick intro about myself. I'm Katja Bonga. I work at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. I'm a manager within our Redefining Value program, and I actually work more closely on natural capital, helping provide training to businesses on nature. And so a quick word about today's objectives. Today will be about understanding what nature-based solutions are and how they can help overcome societal and business challenges, including climate and disaster risk. We're also going to hopefully inspire you to also get started on this journey if you haven't yet, by sharing an experience from a business member and their experience in integrating nature-based solutions. And then finally, we'll be giving a very brief introduction into the IUCN Global Standard for Nature-Based Solutions. A few quick house rules. So please, if you can, go to the participant list, find your name. You have an option to rename yourself. And if you could please add your organization's name, that would be extremely helpful and will help understand who is coming from where. We are going to be making use today of the chat for you to share any comments, questions, and reflections. So please don't hesitate to drop any questions within the chat throughout today's session. We're going to try our best to answer as many questions as we can today. And if we can't do that, any missing questions that were answered, we'll try to follow up with you guys afterwards. Just noting that the session is being recorded today, and you will be receiving the recording and slides, which will be made available on the WBCSD Nature platform. And we'll be sharing more information on where and how you can access those. And then finally, we will be using Mentimeter today. So just plan on already having either your phone near you or opening a browser with Mentimeter so that you can answer the questions we'll have. This is our agenda for today. I'm not going to go into too much details here, just flagging that we've purposely ensured to have lots of moments for questions and reflections So really, again, I do encourage you guys to take the opportunity to ask any questions you have today. Now, you have an absolutely all-star support team today for you. And I'm not going to present everyone in detail because they'll have a chance to each introduce themselves as well. But today you will have my colleague James Smith from WBCSD, who's the Manager of Natural Climate Solutions. We also have Natalie Dosvald from UNEP, who's ecosystem-based adaptation and eco-DRR expert. We have John Porter from Oppla, who's a coordinator. Jonelle Simunic is joining us from ERP, and she's a senior foresight strategist there, and she will be the one giving us the business insight, the business experience into nature-based solutions. We have Jared Boss from IUCN, who's the Director, Global Business and Biodiversity Program. And then finally, we also have today Karen Sumayer-Rear from UNEP, Senior Advisor in DRR. She won't be speaking this morning, but she will be engaging with us in the afternoon session. So again, I just want to take the opportunity here to thank all of our speakers and for the amazing work that has been put behind the scenes to make these workshops a reality today. Workshop material, you're going to be receiving as well a fact sheet, which essentially brings together all of the main key messages that we'll be talking about today, as well as some of the useful resources and links that we will be sharing. And then again, I've already mentioned this, but the slides will also be made available to you. I also just want to flag these two resources, which are really going to be used as a basis for this first session. So we've got a report from WBCSD on accelerating business solutions for climate and nature, which my colleague James will be speaking about in more detail. And then obviously, as I've mentioned already, we will also be looking into the IUCN Global Standard, which Jared Boss will be speaking to later. Now, I'd like to take an opportunity to also hear a bit more about you guys and have a chance to also have you guys introduce yourselves. So I'm going to have here a few Mentimeter questions. So if you can go ahead on the menti.com website, so just enter www.menti.com and then enter the code that you see on the slide right now. So 6666, 4 6s, and then 9493. And I will have the first question appear, which is, which sector do you represent? So let me just switch the sharing screen. Oh, I see answers already coming in. Great. Let me just share that with you guys. Here we are. Super. So we already got 19 of you guys that have answered. There's many of you on the call today, so I'll let a few more of you guys answer. So far we've got a majority of businesses, which is great. These sessions and workshops were really tailored for you guys today. But those of you that are joining us from the civil society or NGO field, research academia, this is also a great opportunity for you guys to hear some of the messaging and language that we use for the business community. And so hopefully you can use this material and knowledge also in your interactions with businesses you may be working with as well. Great, okay, now we seem to have equally as many people from civil society and NGO and business, great. All right, super, so this is helpful to see. So still a good majority of business, civil society and NGO people, great. So this session is really perfectly tailored to you guys. And so then if we can go to the next question, which is, how familiar are you with nature-based solutions? So again, these workshops are really meant to give an introduction and typically tailored to businesses or organizations that are getting started on this journey. So we're expecting that most of you guys will be towards the left end, which is exactly what's happening, great. So I don't know anything about NbS, nature-based solutions, or are you aware of the concept, perhaps heard of it before, but you just don't know or do not have the experience in implementing nature-based solutions. So great that that's a big majority of you guys here today. I'm planning to implement nature-based solutions. Great. Again, for those of you guys that are looking at actually starting to put that into action, hopefully there will be lots of really useful tips for you guys today and during the next workshops to come. and I'm currently or have experience implementing nature-based solutions. So there are some of you guys that have expertise in this today, which is great. So please don't hesitate either to share some of your experience in the chat today. Great, thank you so much, guys, for participating in this. So let me just get back to the slides. And if you can all please be on mute, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, so I do want to give the opportunity for you guys to share a bit more who you are. So if you can also take a few minutes to actually share who you are, which company or organization you work with, where are you based, and particularly also if you already have any specific expectations or early questions for today. So I invite you to go ahead and make use of the chat. I see several of you guys have already started exchanging in there, which is great. So please continue doing so. We'll keep an eye out on some of the answers already. So let us know more about who you are and if you have any questions already at this point or specific expectations. Okay, so I have to manage in a record of 5 minutes to quickly set the scene on why nature-based solutions are important for business, which is not a lot of time. And I'm going to be as quick as possible. And I thought that the best way to bring forward some of the key messages I wanted to bring forward today is by showing to you a video that was developed by WBCSD and with many of our business members. And so I'm going to just again switch screen here and get YouTube up. And let me just also share my computer sound. Here we are. Okay, so I'm not going to give too much more information at this point. I do want to let you have a chance to view the video, and then please don't hesitate to also share any reflections or comments you may have on the video that you're about to see. So enjoy.
We know that our business, our communities, our world will thrive only if nature is respected.
Nature is critical for solving many of the challenges we face. It can capture and sequester, protect biodiversity, produce food, and sustain life.
Businesses need to value how important nature is to them and to society, not only to mitigate their impacts and risks, but also to uncover their dependencies on nature itself.
Businesses have a vital role to play. They determine the way in which economies evolve. They provide an opportunity for consumers to be involved in shaping their future. They are connected with billions of people. If businesses could put nature and nature-based solutions at the center of all their decision-making, they could have a profound impact on the prospects for our world being secure for generations to come.
Our commitment to nurturing our planet starts in the field. We're committed to improving soil health and biodiversity.
We are trying to help produce more food, feed, and fiber to feed a growing population, but with a fraction of the resources that we are currently using.
An important area for us to lead in as business is to commit to the endorsement and implementation of science-based targets for nature to be developed.
Kellogg is investing in nature.
Walmart is investing in nature.
Newforce is investing in nature.
Olam is investing in nature.
Stora Enso is investing in nature because it's good for climate and society.
Rabobank is investing in nature because it's good for society, climate, and food security.
Syngenta is investing in nature because it's absolutely critical to the future of the world.
When it comes to taking better care of the planet, we're in this together.
We're seeing extraordinary actions being taken by CEOs everywhere, and governments listen to business leaders.
We need political leadership to scale investment in natural climate solutions today.
We believe that policy frameworks would attract more capital into both forest production and conservation.
To ensure we are going in the right way, we have to work together. That's why the Paris Agreement is a good step in the right direction.
We as business are going to really rely on governments to set the types of policy mechanisms into place that channel funding into nature-based solutions.
To every business leader everywhere, put nature centrally into all your decision-making, because without business, the world cannot move forward.
The solutions are ready. The finance is there. All we need to do is act today.
Okay, hopefully you were all able to hear and see this video. Let me just quickly get back to my slides. Great. So this video was, as I mentioned, developed by the World Business Council for Sustainable Development with many of our members, as you could hear, as well as partners. And it was launched actually in 2019 at the United Nations Secretary General Summit. And the goal was really to bring forward the voices of major CEOs across industries and geographies. And the key message was really clear. Investing in nature and nature-based solutions is good for society, the environment, and the economy. And as it was highlighted as well, nature can account for over 30% of the emissions reductions needed to address the climate change. And so I'd like to link here with something that is hard to ignore. We can't not mention COVID, because the pandemic has just illustrated how interconnected our environmental, societal, and economic systems are. It has also illustrated how nature was very much at the heart of the emergence of COVID. And now nature also needs to really be a key role towards a recovery and a green recovery today, because the disruptions from climate change and biodiversity collapse will be far more significant than the disruptions we have felt from COVID, which is exactly what this in a nice little comic illustrates. So we have got to invest massively in nature and nature-based solutions. And we're going to have a chance again to hear more today how and why we need to do so rapidly. Now, another graphic I like to show to illustrate also the importance of this is the WEF report. So every year, the World Economic Forum releases its Global Risk Report, which essentially illustrates and shows what are some of the top 5 global risks in terms of likelihood and the top 5 global risks in terms of impact. And so what we can see here is that in the span of just a bit more than 10 years, we went from none of the top risks in terms of likelihood and impact being related to the environment to now nearly all of them being environmentally related. And for the first time in these WEF reports, biodiversity and biodiversity loss are among the top risks. Obviously, with the pandemic, we're going to infectious diseases as another one, and we're likely to face those kind of risks increasingly in the future. And so what this shows is that environmental risks and opportunities are becoming increasingly visible and are felt more and more by the business community. And so businesses are needing to find more and more a way to understand these risks and also manage these. And so what this also says is that to a greater or lesser extent, every business depends and impacts on nature, on natural capital. And what this illustration, again, I like to use shows is that this relationship of impacts and dependencies can deliver costs and benefits back to themselves, but also to society, which in turn can lead to some of the risks and opportunities we were just talking about. And so business really needs to step up their commitments and actions for nature alongside the climate ambitions, because these are interconnected. And nature-based solutions, again, has a key role to play in achieving the Paris Agreement climate goals, as well as has the potential to address other societal challenges. And so what I also want to flag here is that we need to really ensure that these solutions are good for business, are good for nature, but also good for people. And again, this is where we see the interconnections between all of this. And we need to remember that we need to keep people and communities very much at the heart of these solutions to truly succeed. And again, we'll have a chance to talk a lot about that more today. And so here I just want to flag a few other main points and resources. I mean, there's been major reports that have also sounded alarm for urgent actions. These are just some of them. I'm sharing these because we at WBCSD have prepared an executive business summary, which might be helpful for you guys to have. We don't always have time to read through these massive reports. So again, you'll have the links to each one of these, but some of the main wordings coming out from these reports is the rapid decline of the natural world is a crisis even bigger than climate change, again, which is coming back to that little comic I showed before. And this is coming from the IPBES report. Business will not achieve climate commitments unless they address nature loss. These come together. We need investments in nature-based solutions that are positive for nature, climate, and society. And hopefully we'll also have a chance to discuss the importance of helping clarify the definition and scope of nature-based solutions so that we ensure that we do unlock investments and that especially those investments are geared towards projects of high quality. And I think Jared will certainly speak a bit more about this. We need urgently an apex for science-based targets for nature. The climate agenda is working towards creating a 1.5 degree world. We need something similar for nature. And then finally, nature is cross-cutting, and another key aspect to be successful is collaboration. Now, with no further ado, I want to hand over now to the two experts we have today. And these are really the people that are breathing, living nature-based solutions, natural climate solutions, and will be able to be a great support for you today. And so it's my pleasure to now hand over to my colleague, James, who will go through the what of nature-based solutions for addressing issues of disaster risk, climate, nature, and equity. And he'll be followed by Natalie. Over to you, James.
Thanks, Katia. Thanks for all of that important scene-setting information that's really helpful to lead into what I'd like to present on today. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the role of nature-based solutions in addressing climate and nature crises, and we'll leave the disaster risk element to Natalie, who will follow. So the important thing to note is that the twin crises of nature loss and climate change are inextricably linked. Climate change is one of the leading drivers of biodiversity loss globally, and nature provides us with carbon storage, climate regulation, and other important goods and services, which we call ecosystem services, which we can see in the top right-hand graph there, that are important for people and of course underpin business. And so nature loss is also one of the primary drivers of climate change. So we therefore have developed quite a vicious cycle. Climate change drives nature loss drives climate change. But this also provides a great opportunity. If we invest in nature for climate services, climate benefits, what we term nature-based solutions for climate or natural climate solutions, we can tackle both the biodiversity and climate crises in a holistic way and provide a whole range of other benefits for society, including increased food security, generating sustainable livelihoods for many millions of people in rural locations, and therefore facilitating a just rural transition. So if we move to the next slide, I think most people are aware that obviously in 2015, 6 years ago now, the international community came together in Paris and declared a commitment to limit global climate change to well below 2 degrees C and preferably 1.5 degrees C. Now, meeting this Paris Agreement goal requires that we rapidly reduce greenhouse gas emissions from across the entire economy. But not only do we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but we also need to actively remove carbon that is already in the atmosphere that comes from all of our historic emissions over the last 200 to 300 years. And we have very few technological solutions that are capable of doing that now. On the other hand, nature-based climate solutions or natural climate solutions, which store or capture carbon from the atmosphere and store this in vegetation and soils, can do this now, can do this at scale, can do this at low costs, and also deliver a vast array of co-benefits, as Katia alluded to previously. And there are estimates that natural climate solutions could provide 30% of the cost-effective climate mitigation needed by 2030. So if we move to the next slide, to make this a little bit clearer, what am I talking about when I describe natural climate solutions? Well, these are activities that conserve or restore natural ecosystems or improve land or coastal regions that are under management. So these natural climate solutions can either avoid carbon emissions from entering the atmosphere, for instance, by preventing deforestation, preventing the destruction of peatlands and natural grasslands, etc. Or they can actively remove carbon from the atmosphere, called carbon sequestration. And activities that would do this include planting trees in croplands, forest restoration or afforestation, etc. And therefore, through these two processes of avoiding emissions from natural ecosystems and removing carbon from the atmosphere, harnessing the power of nature, we can use these natural climate solutions to tackle climate change. So if we move to the next slide. So, we've heard both from Katia and then the previous few slides from myself that we desperately need to invest in natural climate solutions to tackle climate change and the biodiversity crises. But the focus of this webinar is on the role of NbS within business. And so the question really becomes, how can companies incorporate investments into nature into their business activities? I work particularly on the carbon side and on the climate side. And so the question becomes for me, how can companies integrate nature into their climate strategy? Well, there's great momentum growing behind corporate net zero claims, and natural climate solutions can play a critical role in helping companies to reach a position of net zero. So for companies to reach a position of net zero, where there's no emissions, no net emissions of carbon into the atmosphere to contribute to climate change, companies need to reduce their emissions as much as possible in the next 30 years, in line with climate science. And we can see that on these blue bars above the x-axis, which are declining over time. They also need to, once companies have reduced emissions as much as possible, in many sectors there will be some emissions which they cannot get rid of at all. These are called residual emissions, and companies need to balance these residual emissions through investing in an equal volume of carbon removal credits. And companies can also compensate for their emissions as they move towards net zero, so effectively balance their emissions with activities that are positive for the climate elsewhere. And natural climate solutions can contribute to net zero in each of these three aspects of the net zero journey: internal decarbonisation, neutralisation, and also compensation. So if we move to the next slide, if we think about this, this decarbonisation aspect of the net zero journey, that's businesses reducing their operational emissions as much as possible. Natural climate solutions can really play an important role in many sectors in facilitating this. So, for instance, the agriculture, forestry, and land use sector accounts for 25% of global emissions. That's the second largest source of emissions after the use of fossil fuels. And so it therefore provides a great opportunity to invest in nature to reduce these emissions. So land sector companies in particular, those which have businesses which are focused on producing or utilizing natural resources, here, for instance, food and beverage sector, fast-moving consumer goods, forest and forest products, etc., can invest in NCS to reduce their greenhouse gas footprint. Now, obviously, companies should look to follow the biodiversity mitigation hierarchy and look to avoid or minimize their impacts on natural ecosystems as a first step, and that can include activities such as deforestation-free commitments. But also there's a great opportunity to use NCS to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by changing management practices, for instance, in the way that land is farmed or how forests are managed. And this can help generate, store carbon, generate climate resilience. So perhaps let's move to the next slide and maybe we could walk through a bit of an example. So the example here is improved agricultural practices for soil health. So soils are a non-renewable resource. This statistic surprised me recently, but I heard that it takes up to 1,000 years to create 2 to 3 centimeters of soil. So some of our agricultural practices are degrading our soils. For instance, leaving the land bare or of cover during the winter can lead to erosion, can lead to the loss of topsoil. Growing the same crop in the same space, the same place many years over can lead to losses in soil fertility, and ploughing up of the soil as well can disturb the soil composition, reduce the organic matter within this, lead to carbon emissions, and actually stop soils from containing water. So this is leading to declines in agricultural production globally, the cost of up to 400 billion per year, and leads to increased costs for agricultural inputs such as fertilizers, etc. And this has a major impact on businesses. Obviously, it means that this land is not as resilient. It increases business exposure to climate impacts, which we know are increasing every year, and also means that this increased costs for business and also for consumers, or us as the people who will purchase their products. So if we move to the next slide, changing management practices can improve soil health whilst reducing greenhouse gas emissions and can contribute to net zero whilst doing so. So if we imagine as an example going from extensive monoculture, so growing the same crop in the same place every year, regular ploughing, bare soils, and extensive fertilizer use, to a system where we have crop diversity, where we rotate the crops across different land patches every year, and we introduce practices such as no-till and cover cropping. This can lead to reduced greenhouse gas emissions, increased soil carbon, increase the ability of soils to retain water, and therefore can lead to climate mitigation, to reduce crop losses, for instance, by avoiding droughts and extreme weather events, etc., and therefore increase yields. So the overall impact of this investment in changing management practices leads to climate resilient supply chains, a more sustainable business model that works for key stakeholders, including farmers, and can reduce costs. So there's great incentives and value to be had for investing in NbS. If we move to the next slide, and if we skip this one, move on, and to the next one. Thanks. So as we've seen, we need to invest in nature to tackle the climate and biodiversity crisis. Business has a critical role to play in accelerating investments in NbS that support climate, nature, and people. And corporate climate change commitments, such as net zero targets, are a mechanism by which we can help finance or channel finance towards nature-based solutions. But to unlock investment in high quality projects, we need to have a common understanding of what defines a nature-based solution. And so at WBCSD last year, we released a report which summarizes the current thinking on nature-based solutions and natural climate solutions, and their definitions and distinctions. Of course, as a minimum, both nature-based solutions and natural climate solutions should ensure net zero loss of biodiversity. So if we move quickly to the next slide. So on this slide, we make clear the distinction between nature-based solutions and natural climate solutions. So if we look at the table in the top right-hand corner there, nature-based solutions are based on ensuring that we support functioning ecosystems, that they deliver benefits for societal challenges, for instance here, climate regulation, water provision, disaster risk reduction, support food production, etc. And that they should also be positive for biodiversity and ecosystem services. On the other hand, NCS, yes, it's based on functioning ecosystems. It should deliver benefits for societal challenges, but is really focused on producing or maximizing those climate benefits, and is not by definition always focused on generating biodiversity and ecosystem services. So what does this mean? It means that not all nature-based solutions are natural climate solutions and vice versa. Some NbS nature-based solutions will deliver benefits to society through ecosystem services they support, but may not necessarily have large impacts on climate. And we could think about river restoration work that reduces flooding risk. Similarly, not all natural climate solutions are nature-based solutions. For instance, restoring land with a monoculture non-native tree plantation will store carbon and provide jobs, but will have limited biodiversity benefit. However, natural climate solutions and nature-based solutions natural climate solutions are nature-based solutions when the non-climate impacts, those benefits to people and biodiversity, are maximized and considered in the project design. And to ensure that that happens, we need to make sure that natural climate solutions are developed with appropriate environmental and social safeguards. Fundamentally, high quality natural climate solutions should be nature-based solutions, as they should be nature positive and deliver societal benefits, particularly for communities. So if we move to my last slide. So finally, I'd like to highlight that at WBCSD, we convened the Natural Climate Solutions Alliance. The Natural Climate Solutions Alliance is a multi-stakeholder coalition, over 50 organizations dedicated to scaling up natural climate solutions through the voluntary carbon markets with integrity. I'm really excited to announce that through this alliance, we have developed some best practice guidance for companies on what counts as high quality natural climate solutions supply and demand. And we're looking to release this document later this month. This covers such questions as for a company that is looking to invest in natural climate solutions, carbon credits, the demand side eligibility. So what does a company need to do to demonstrate credits are used in a robust fashion? And on the supply side, what criteria demonstrate high quality natural climate solutions credits and the standards that verify these credits. Thanks. I think that's the end of my slides, Katja. Thank you very much. Look forward to handing on over to Natalie.
Yes, thank you, James. And so thank you also for explaining the difference between natural climate solutions and nature-based solutions. And if anybody still is confused, don't hesitate to write in the chat. I'm really going to be focusing more on the nature-based solutions part, and nature-based solutions, as I'll repeat it again, are ways of working with nature to help address societal challenges. And what I'm going to be focusing on are a few examples related to helping to reduce disaster risk, which is really important. And you may or may not know that nature has a really big role to play, because there are tight linkages between the environment and hazards, how they react. So I'm going to go through just 3 examples, also examples where businesses are involved, to help give you some background. So the first example takes place in South Africa, and this is a city initiative. So it's not, let's say, directly a business initiative. However, implementing this and also being awarded designs comes to the business community in terms of architects and planning and all those types of things. And so in this area in South Africa, they had a big problem with flooding in this urban area. And so they decided that they were going to look at different ways to be able to reduce flooding. There are 3 potential options. The first option is, let's say, what we have sometimes termed as grey infrastructure. So that's engineered structure. And in this case, it was a concrete culvert. And the second has to do with hybrid, which is a combination of a concrete culvert section and a renaturalized stream section. And the third is a nature-based option, which is a stream version. So which is renaturalizing a stream, that is turning it from, let's say, a canal, a very straight canal, into something that is more natural. And what this an analysis of the cost benefits revealed was that between the 3 options, both the nature-based option, so creating a stream, as you can see in this picture, or renaturizing a stream, as well as a hybrid option of combining the concrete culvert and the renaturalized stream, those 2 options were the most cost-effective, but also provided additional benefits, which is relatively obvious when you think about it. If you have a stream, you can, which is with nice nature around, you also have areas for recreation, you have areas to educate your children about nature, but you also have biodiversity benefits. You also have carbon sequestration. I just see a quick question of what does renaturizing a stream mean? And I'll answer that directly. It means turning a straight canal of a stream, or in some cases, streams have been kind of covered under the earth. I don't know if you ever knew, but that does happen. And renaturizing means that you're returning the stream to a more natural way of being. So reintroducing the bends, revegetating, as you can see in this stream here. I hope that helps to explain. Now, and Kat, if you can just click once more. What they then also found when they analyzed between these 3 options is that the option which helped to reduce the most damages from flooding was actually returning the stream to a natural state, rather than keeping it in its, let's say, canalized version, or even having any of the other versions. So that's just also a big point forward, how nature-based solutions can help really reduce flooding. Next slide, please. So you may or may not have heard that mangroves, so mostly in, can find quite a few of them, for instance, around the oceans in Africa, or also in Asia. Mangroves are trees that line the coastline, that kind of thrive in the low waters before the coast. And what happens having these forests, they act a little bit like, but in a better sense, like a seawall. They help stop waves and have reduced the impact of in some cases of tsunamis, but also of storms and cyclones, while providing at the same time fisheries. And so Tokyo Marine, which is an insurance company, as part of their corporate social responsibility, has worked to protect and restore and rehabilitate many of these mangrove areas for what they call as insurance for the earth. And they've been doing this since 1999. And since that time, it has been estimated that it has produced a number of natural services like flood protection, like biodiversity, carbon, and estimated at 1 billion in terms of services, and 40% of which relate to disaster risk reduction. So nature is really key. Next slide, please. And then a third example, also a private company, which is the Philippines Energy Development Corporation. They are one of the largest renewable energy companies in the Philippines. And their project sites, so where they have their renewable energy, are often located in remote areas, middle of nature, that are often very vulnerable to natural hazards. So in order to be able to protect their sites, they have undertaken a lot of watershed management projects. So helping protect tree areas, which if you didn't know, if you remove the trees from a slope, you're more vulnerable to landslides. So by protecting that, you will also be protecting any infrastructure that you find there. At the same time, it also helps to protect water from flooding, but also keeping water for the dry season. In doing so, as well as protecting their infrastructure, it also produces other benefits in terms of protecting biodiversity. So they've managed to save 96 threatened species, is really good, as well as providing many community benefits. And so this was just to give you some examples of what business could do to help improve their resilience against disasters. Thank you.
Super. Thank you so much, James and Natalie, for this extremely informative presentations. Really much appreciated. We have received a lot of questions in the chat, and actually, James and Natalie, you've been amazing at already answering quite a few of them. So let me see if there's perhaps one of the latest ones that we can still address here. So I think there's one from Anwar, directed to James, on achieving business value and investment benefits of nature-based solutions and nature climate solutions seems long-term. How can a small enterprise, more especially in sub-Saharan Africa, see such values amidst their short-term plans? James, are you happy to try and tackle that question?
So I didn't quite capture all of that. Could you repeat it, please?
Yes. So let me say it again. So Anwar is saying that, achieving business value and investment benefits of nature-based and nature climate solutions seem long-term. How can a SME, essentially, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, see such value amidst their short-term plans?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very, very good question. I think though at the same time, I think this begs the question back on the SME. Is this an enterprise that you are looking to run over the long term and to be resilient in the face of a changing climate, changing consumer preferences, changing societal pressures and regulations on business, etc.? Because we've already seen over the last couple of years massive momentum in terms of nature for climate approaches for climate change, adaptation to climate change and mitigating climate change, both from a regulatory perspective and also from a consumer perspective. And I think that there are strong drivers on all aspects of business, both in terms of ensuring you have a resilient supply chain, both ensuring that you provide a product that your consumers wish to have, that is sustainable and doesn't have an impact on the climate, etc. So I think that there are multiple reasons why, although there might be some short-term pain potentially, depending on what business you're discussing, which sector it is in, there is certainly substantial long-term gain given the extensive and quite potentially damaging impacts that climate change may have. It's difficult to answer without a full understanding of what type of business that might be, etc.
Yeah, fair enough. Thanks, James, for attempting a first answer to this. I think we're going to take one other question, and I think, Natalie, you were going to offer an answer to Catherine's question on where the nature-based or hybrid solution require additional land, any lessons around how this is managed, especially in urban environments, and if there's any lessons too on coordinating stakeholders whose support is needed to implement nature-based solutions.
Yes, thank you, Katja. So, I mean, it's a really, really good question. And the answer is, with nature-based solutions do and don't require land, in the sense of, depending where you are, if we think of like a river, if you have a river that is already canalized, in a channel, then making that more natural again is not going to change in the sense of needing much more land. And in that case, also provides much more recreational benefits. You can make it a multi-purpose land. Now, in other situations, of course, nature-based solutions can take up land, especially if you want to think about making sure that a floodplain is kept free of, let's say, housing, so that it acts as an area to collect the floodwaters rather than having it flooded, having towns well, not towns, but having houses flooded. So there, I guess, discussions are also around risk. So in those particular situations, sometimes it can be relatively obvious once you explain, well, if you build a house here, you're going to be flooded. So then it's more likely you can have better coordination. But on the other hand, there are situations where you do need to coordinate, especially in terms of agricultural land that may need to be used either around near the coast or around a river. And there does need to be conversations with different stakeholders, finding out what are their needs. And really, it really involves a lot of conversation, and that's all I can really say. And you have to also involve them and see what can they get out of it, and how you can work around that. So I hope that answers the question.
Great, thank you so much, Natalie and James. We're gonna stop here because we're running a little bit over time, and I do want to make sure we have sufficient time for our next speaker. But thank you so much. You guys have managed to answer quite a bit of questions. What I'll do is suggest that Natalie and James, to the extent that you can, it would be great if you can answer the few additional questions that have been coming into the chat. There's been some really good comments in there. So thank you guys for continuing to engage in the chat here. So I now would like to pass on to Janelle Simonich, who is joining us from Europe. And I'm really excited to have her join us again. She actually presented in one of our last events. We loved her presentation so much that we've asked her to come back, and I'm pleased that she is here with us again. So a quick word about Janelle. She's a senior strategist in Arup's Foresight, Research and Innovation team. She specializes in sustainability, regenerative urban systems, and advanced technologies that will help shape the future of the built environment. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Arup, in short, it's a building design and engineering consultancy. Before I hand over to Janelle, though, I just want to encourage your active listening and to pay particular attention to some of the points that we have here. So listen about what's been the situation, what was the trigger for Arup to actually engage in nature-based solutions, what was the approach used, what were perhaps some of the key stakeholders involved or the enablers. And there's certainly challenges along the journey as well, which Janelle will share with us. And so listen out also on how she actually overcome some of those. So again, please share any reflections or questions for Janelle in the chat, and we'll try to get to those. So I'm just going to try now to smoothly switch the sharing screen again here, and hopefully this works. And Janelle, over to you.
Thank you. And hello, everybody. I think it looks like the PDF, but you should be able to do full screen still. There's usually a view in the view option. If not, it's okay.
Yes, absolutely. Here it is. Thank you. All right.
There you go.
Can you see this okay?
Yep.
Super.
So thank you, Katya, and hi, everybody. As she mentioned, my name is Janelle, and I focus on sustainable futures at ARUP. Today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about regenerative cities and systems and explain why we use that term. I think for today's purposes, you'll probably hear me interchange regenerative and nature-based a bit, but for simplicity terms, we are using them synonymously. Anyhow. And so what I've been really doing over the last few years is exploring the question, how can we utilize the built environment as a tool to deliver more positive planetary outcomes? Yep, and so just a quick overview about me. So my background's in architecture, city planning, and I worked as a practitioner for about 5 years or so before coming to ARUP, where I now work in foresight. And what we do in foresight is really look at the future of the built environment and try to understand how trends, drivers, and things that are happening on the ground today might be shaping the world that we build in the future. Next slide. And just again, briefly, as she mentioned, ARUP is a building design and engineering consultancy. So you might have seen some of our projects. We're global and we tend to do really large scale infrastructure and building projects. Next slide. And so just to kind of really get into the, I guess, meat of it, this the text here is just really to remind us that, you know, the planet and the health of the planet are really, you know, imperative today, and trying to find solutions and understand how we tackle these. It's really important to just remember that the issues we face today are really systemic. They're not siloed, and we can't just develop and deliver solutions alone. It's going to take a plethora of all of us working together. Next slide. So just a quick overview and why we started looking at this at ARUP. So for me and my team, we really began looking into regenerative design and nature-based solutions because for us, we see it as the future. Our industry's been one of the biggest contributors to degradation globally. And when I say our industry, I mean the built environment. So cities, infrastructure, transportation networks, that sort of element. So for us, it's really important to consider how we can be a catalyst for driving change. So essentially, a lot of the data has shown that the built environment is, again, one of the biggest contributors to degradation. And so for us, it's, can we rethink how we design and build to deliver more positive planetary outcomes and use this medium to do so? And inside of ARUP, this really began with the foresight team in terms of our ability to progress and amplify ideas and concepts to drive change. Next slide. Skip the next one. Sorry, I changed it slightly. We're next. The ecology one, the one that's right before. There you go. So just as mentioned a minute ago, the exploration for us really began with the foresight team in terms of the ability to amplify, but on the ground and in parallel, it's really begun with our ecology and biodiversity teams in-house. So while we're a building design and engineering firm, we have a lot of specialists in different domains, and ecology is one of them. And they've really been working on understanding nature-based solutions and trying to encourage our clients and practitioners to think more about this over the last 15 years and how to implement. So they've been an integral partner in terms of us trying to progress the agenda internally at ARUP. Next slide, yeah. And so next is a little bit around how we are doing it. So first, I think there's probably 3 different steps. There's 3 different, I guess, projects or examples I wanted to talk about quickly. The first is the Planetary Boundaries Framework. We've been looking at this for about 4 years now and trying to understand how we can use the planetary boundaries as a framework to guide how we design and build. And we're really using this to shape our thinking internally and as kind of a baseline for a lot of the other work that we've been doing in the firm. And we'll go to the next slide because they intertwine. So we've also been looking at regenerative design, as I mentioned, is kind of the terminology we've been using in our industry. The slide shows ecological loss to gain, and it's kind of, you can think of it over a time continuum. And there's a little marker where it says best practice today. And for us, that's again in the built environment. But if you think about this, our aim is really to get to regenerative design. And right now, we're trying to figure out how to do that. And that's where the planetary boundaries come in as one possible option to help us get there. But what we're doing as both a Foresight team and across the firm is trying to develop visions and actions at scale. So trying to find different regenerative solutions that we can use with our clients and when we have new projects. Next slide. And so this one, so Green Ribs is an infrastructure project. So in parallel to the work we've been doing around strategy and research, we've also been delivering client work that considers nature-based solutions and other environmental design principles. And so one of these examples is kind of what's on the screen, Green Ribs, which is a suite of green infrastructure projects that combine mitigating negative environmental impacts of road building with tackling a loss of biodiverse habitats in commercial farmland in the United Kingdom. The aim of this project is really to foster stewardship approach to landscape to create an ecologically rich and biodiverse cultural experience within a vibrant landscape where the community is really still integral to connecting the environment and visitors to create and encounter new experiences. This work is really aimed to deliver a vision to protect and enhance the environmental resources of landscape, water, soil, air, biodiversity, and a historic environment that it sits within. And so it starts with the first 3 pilot projects, and based on the success of those, we plan to deliver 3 additional pilot projects over the next 5 years. And so putting them all together, this will complete a landscape scale suite of 6 different ribs, which will make a significant contribution to better health, well-being, and the resilience habitats of habitats, landscape, and local communities in this part of the UK, which is in Cornwall, for those of you who know the region. Thank you. So why did we choose to focus on nature-based solutions? As I mentioned a little bit earlier, it's really, for us, it's about the future. We see this as the future. Nature and climate are the biggest challenges we face today. And I think, most of us here probably understand that or have that as one of our biggest challenges. And so as such, we have people internally working to develop and deliver solutions. And what does it mean for Arup? So sustainability is really at the heart of everything we do. We've came out with a new strategy about 6 months ago, which is what the blurb on the screen is, where we've stated that sustainable development is everything. And so for us, we really see this as a way for us to change our approach and to focus on unlocking new opportunities to deliver new skills, services, and solutions. Next slide. It's also, I think, kind of important to note that we're an employee-owned company, which I know is different than quite a few other businesses. But as such, one of our missions is to shape a better world. And our first step at doing this is instilling different values into our staff. And I'm not going to read them all, but what I put on the screen is essentially a part of our key speech, which outlines different values and aspects that we really value as a company. Next slide. So challenges we've faced today. So changing gears slightly and just kind of going into challenges and opportunities. I wanted to share with you some of the challenges we faced so far and some ideas for how we've overcome them. I think it's important to note that we and most of our industry don't know how to deliver these concepts fully or at scale yet. And I think it's important to just recognize that and as a first step. But the thing that we do know is that it's time to figure it out and that we have the skills and knowledge to do so. And it's also important that we work together to develop and deliver these innovative solutions because, you know, as I mentioned, it's, you know, it's not, it takes a community to find new answers and to change the world. So here I've outlined just a few of the challenges we faced over the years, and I thought I'd highlight a few. I won't read them all, but I think one is just understanding the context that you're in, wherever you are. I know for most industries outside of agriculture, there are limited examples, knowledge, understanding, and experience in how to deliver nature-based or regenerative solutions. You know, there's a few outliers probably in your companies or in your industries, but I think it's known that it's not the mainstream yet. Another thing we've been finding, and it's a bit of a taboo perhaps, is aligning with tech. I've noticed, you know, over the years, often the environmental experts and the people who work in tech don't intersect often. But if we really want to amplify and scale up our solutions, I think it'll be important for us to really get different experts involved. And, you know, tech is just one of many other industries or experiences and expertise that can help us identify ways to amplify our solutions. And next slide. And so just finally, I'd like to leave us with a little bit of inspiration and belief in the possible in the form of some, I don't know, calling them tips and tricks that we've learned, and hopefully can also be, you know, useful to you and your businesses. So again, I put them all up on the screen, but it's really just encouraging people to have a vision and a belief in the possible. You know, we can't change the pathway forward unless we really believe in it. It's important to be passionate. I think it's also important to push boundaries. I know for us, I think part of the benefit of that is having a foresight team that can be a bit provocative and challenge the status quo. But thinking big and pushing boundaries just really, you know, amplifies opportunities. And part of it is just to try. So failure is part of the journey, and we're not going to figure it out the first time, and maybe not the second or third time. But if we keep trying, you know, we'll be able to develop and deliver these new ways of working. And next slide. And with that, I just wanted to say thank you, and hope, yeah, and pass back to Katja.
Thank you so much, Janelle, and a nice way to end with those practical tips. I find those always really helpful. So we're going to take one question that came into the chat, which we found was quite interesting. So let me quickly read it out to you, Janelle. So it's a question from Maria. So she would like to know if we would suggest that private business should run projects with a larger scope rather than their specific business operations. In other words, land rewildering in areas of cities where they operate? Or do you think that it is a duty of the public admins to do so? So perhaps a question that others can also reflect on, but good to maybe hear your perspective as a business as well.
Sure. I think for us, it's maybe there's probably three parts to this. One, you know, in the built environment, you can't do anything alone. Like if we're going to design and build something, there's always a client and there's always a government. And then there's us plus all of the other engineers, architects, etc. And I understand other businesses are probably different, but like it's really not, it's nearly not impossible, but very challenging to do anything alone. So it's always in our industry going to be a bit of collaboration and understanding each other. So we need the policies that say, you know, you need to do these things. So for example, in the UK government, I believe I think it's the year 2030, but either way, they've set a target for when everyone needs to hit net zero. So now our clients are coming to us and saying, how do I build a net zero road? How do I do net zero aviation? Because the government's really pushing it, and that, you know, drives the clients, which then drives us to figure out how to do these solutions. You know, there are opportunities for us to go directly to clients and make these suggestions, but I think it really works best if you are able to align across the different sectors.
Super. Thanks, Jenna. That's helpful. We just got another question come in, and I think that will be the last one I'll take here. So Penina is asking if, as part of business development, how can we integrate that as part of sustainable ingredient element in donor agreements? I don't know if that's something you can speak to.
I don't know what a donor agreement is. I can make an assumption.
I don't know if, Penina, you want to clarify a bit the question here. I'm not sure. Policies. So how can we integrate that as part of the policies?
Yeah, I guess maybe we'll think of it in a potential, at least in our context. So a lot of the policies that we tend to work with have to deal with local governments and local communities. You know, the UN also, I have my SDG badge on. So, like having, you know, the UN and other folks that these policies are really helpful in terms of like operations and how we run the company. And at ARUP, we're aligning that, I guess, is another element of what we've been doing. So it's not just working with clients, but, you know, I think 3, 4, 5 years ago, we also adopted the SDGs. And so we've been, since then, we created an internal sustainable development group, and they are really tasked with transitioning the company. And so having something like the UN set policies is helpful in that context. And I guess part of it is just trying to be in the room. I don't know if that's an appropriate answer, but I know it's taken us years, but we now have an international development team, and because of that, you know, our ARUP is involved in the UN and some of the other, you know, global organizations to help shape these policies and things that happen. So if there's an equivalent for you in your business, trying to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, super. And yes, we're talking a lot today about how business can help shape the agenda, accelerate the transition, but obviously having the policies in place, the frameworks to help accelerate is also absolutely crucial. Great. Well, thank you so much, Janelle. You can maybe have a look. There's been a few comments as well on your presentation, but thanks again so much for this really inspiring presentation. So thanks again. So I'm gonna, unfortunately, Jared, skip this Mentimeter question in interest of time here, but hopefully we can ask that question during the second workshop. But I do want to now hand it over to my colleague, Jared Boss from IUCN, who's going to quickly introduce you guys into the IUCN Nature-Based Solutions Standard. Just noting here that there will be the second session that will be really dedicated to going much more in depth into the standard. Today, Jared is just going to give you a flavor of what it is and an introduction and preparation for the second workshop. So Jared, over to you.
Thanks, Katja, and I hope you're hearing me well. You can move to the next slide. I'll make my presentation short because we're running a little bit behind. And as Katja said, this is really a teaser for you to come and join the next workshop, which is on June 24. We'll do the same where we run one in the morning and one in the afternoon for European time to have a great spread of representation. 2 words about IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. Why I'm putting up this slide in this nature-based solutions presentation is because it's really the whole union that was behind the actual development of the nature-based solutions standard, global standard. And it's the full 17,000 experts. It's the full membership from a government standpoint as well as from an NGO standpoint that are giving their experience, you know, and enriching and informing the nature-based solution standard that we'll be presenting to you. Next slide. This infographic we developed in the project We Value Nature, which is a campaign of helping business to scale up their interventions into nature. And it was very natural capital focused. And of course, when you look at the top line of stocks, flows, and values, there you really realize, hey, these are the slides picked from the natural capital protocol. But they end up in an arrow that goes down in identifying the needs, but also the challenges faced by business and society. And that's where nature-based solutions comes in, where instead of taking the top line, you actually start from the bottom. You actually look at how can I invest in nature, and how can this investment in nature actually bring solutions which protect and sustainably manage and restore natural and modified ecosystems, really address the societal challenges effectively and adaptively, and then really provide human well-being and biodiversity benefits. And what I just told you is the actual formal definition of nature-based solutions as defined by IUCN. And hopefully that flows into the stocks of natural capital, and allowing them the flows and the value of natural capital to be recognized. The same paradigm shift needed to happen within the conservation community, who was very focused on safeguarding nature for the sake of nature. But now we also need to combine this with safeguarding nature for the benefit of society and safeguarding society. So that's really where we're trying to bring the two worlds together. Next slide. And that's where the starting point of nature-based solutions. So remember that, because at the next workshop, you'll have some quizzes around that. Is societal challenges. Like all the previous presenters were showing you, you're starting with identifying what's the challenge, what's the societal challenge that you're trying to solve, the ones that are recognized under the Sustainable Development Goals, and then actually see on how nature can be an instrument and an engine to address these societal challenges. I did one thing. I actually changed the presentation, the number that I had on flooding damages, because in the chat box, I saw that some people shared new information that it's 65 billion of flooding damages averted by mangroves in the various countries. So I updated that information. Next slide. Now, the global standard is really trying to provide a framework so that it safeguards nature from overexploitation. It also engages really the stakeholders, and we heard from all the previous presenters how important that is, but it also helps building a common language and understanding. And that's extremely important, because we have very different worlds that have very specific languages and jargons, and sometimes we are speaking across each other. And then finally, it's also to increase the demand. We have defined this global standard so that it also helps the financial community to get in there and actually see on how they can assess their portfolios and start really diverting their finances to these projects that are high in the delivery of nature-based solutions. And then finally, more at the policy level, how can we incentivize a positive, sustainable change? Now, we will go in our presentation on the June 24th on explaining that there are other solutions out there, like James did on nature climate solutions, and also trying to articulate on how these can all become nature-based solutions ultimately. So my one before last slide is really on the actual standard, which has 8 criteria. And there's not one criteria that's more important than the other. They actually all are important, because it's actually the holistic view and all what these criteria bring that will actually make an efficient nature-based solutions. And design at scale is one that responds to an earlier question. Yes, even if you're looking at and doing a solution that's very much for your operations within your control, you need to look at what's the impact and what are the other users of that landscape going to be involved and how they're going to be affected. Because if you want your solutions to be resilient over time, you need that. The same as the last point, which is on sustainability and mainstreaming. This is about the policies within the companies, but the policies around the companies in the regulatory framework. How do we make sure that there is an incentive mechanism to allow for nature-based solutions to be further scaled up? I'm stopping here just for the sake of time and presentation. So next week, on the 24th of June, next slide, that's when you will hear more about the criteria and the indicators, the system that we've built around it, so that you can verify if your existing projects or upcoming projects are compatible to that. You will again here about how we can help build climate and disaster resilience, but we already had a lot of presentations and examples today. We will also be describing some of examples on how people have used the global standard at the moment and how these pilots have helped the project proponents to improve their project over time, because that's really what the aim is out there. And hopefully this is a platform where you can then become even further involved, as this is not something that we can do on our own. We need your support, your expertise, and especially your projects to develop this further. Thank you very much, Katja. I tried to keep it short to help us gaining a bit of time as we are nearing the end of the fantastic workshop, and great information has been provided by all the previous speakers.
Yes, amazing. Thanks, Jared. We are now back track on time. So this is perfect. Thank you so much for being effective here. So no particular question directly related to the standard, Jared. And again, we'll have the second workshop to address some of those. So we continue here. And again, maybe Jared, if you can just keep an eye out on any questions that may come, that would be great. Thank you so much. So I'd like to now pass over to John, who's going to walk through some additional useful resources and platforms that will help in this subject. So John, over to you.
Hello, everybody, and thanks to all the speakers who've gone already. It's been a fantastic workshop. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to give you a very quick introduction to two resources for natural capital and nature-based solutions. I see there's been quite a few questions in the chat, people asking for resources. So you should find both of these web platforms very useful to learn more about these important subjects for business. Next slide. So the We Value Nature campaign is funded by the European Commission in the Horizon 2020 programme. And it's all about making nature the new normal for businesses across Europe. But the resources that have been developed are very useful for businesses around the world, and indeed can be adapted for your own purposes. Next slide. So on the We Value Nature platform, you'll find training resources, an open media library, which contains different types of media, so video, images, sound files that are of use to learn more about natural capital and nature in general for business. And then there's also a set of natural capital stories, which are case studies about how businesses have brought nature into the heart of their business. Next slide, please. So importantly, on We Value Nature, the training that's been developed is open. So it's made available under a Creative Commons attribution license. So that means you're free to use and adapt it for your own business. And indeed, businesses have been doing this already, including outside Europe. So we've had businesses in Japan that have been adapting it into their own, translating the materials and using it for their own businesses. So there's the web link there to We Value Nature, and we'll also post that in the chat as well. So along with We Value Nature, the next slide, please, there's also a new initiative also funded by the European Commission called Network Nature. And this is all about upscaling and sort of increasing the emphasis on nature-based solutions and creating opportunities for local, regional, national and international cooperation to really sort of spread the concepts of nature-based solutions. So on the Network Nature web platform, there's many case studies. So that includes case studies at a catchment scale, so looking at a large landscape scale, but also at individual schools level. So there's a whole different range of case studies about how nature-based solutions are being applied. Next slide, please. So there's a wide range of resources, including publications, obviously the NbS standard, and many other relevant publications about nature-based solutions and the business case for applying those nature-based solutions. So you can access and download those resources. So next slide, please. And then there's also a wide range of different news and blogs. There's a list of events relevant to nature-based solutions. And through the platform, you can interact with NbS experts and access soon to be launched business training materials, which will be added shortly as well. So you can see the web link there. We'll also be hosting all of the outputs from this workshop on the We Value Nature platform. And we'll put links in the chat at the end about this, about where you can access those, and also to complete the quiz to gain your certificate of participation. So thank you all for your interest.
Great. Thank you so much, John. And again, for also being very effective here. Thanks so much. I'll let you maybe just drop the link to Network Nature as well in the chat. And I've done that for We by Nature. Great. Well, just on time, which is perfect. I'm now going to take a few minutes to actually wrap up and share a few next steps with you guys. Just want to acknowledge here the objectives again that we've achieved by it's the end of today after 1 hour and a half. So we had a great presentation from Natalie and James on what nature-based solutions are and how they can help overcome some of the societal and business challenges, including climate and disaster risk. We've been inspired by Janelle and her great example of how ERP is working around nature-based solutions. And finally, Jared has walked us through an introduction to the IUCN Global Standard. So now what I'd like to do is actually gather a bit from you guys. What's been your key takeaway or learning point? I mean, I realize we've just bombarded you with lots of extremely valuable and hopefully useful information. And so it's always good after these kind of sessions to actually take a bit of time to reflect on, okay, what have I actually learned and what's been the biggest learning point for me today. So if you can go again onto the Mentimeter, and I will share again my screen here, so you can see the code. So again, just go on the menti.com website and enter the code that you can see here at the top. So 4 6s and then 9493. And please just share in a few words, what has been your key takeaway or learning point today? Oh, thanks, Natalie, for dropping that in the chat as well. So you've got the code to the Menti in the chat as well now. Okay, great. So a few answers coming in. So I was confused between climate solutions and nature-based solutions. Now I'm clear. Well, that is perfect because honestly, that is probably the most important point that we wanted to clarify today. This is exactly what the session was meant to bring. So that's really good to hear. I wasn't aware of the difference. Okay, this is already the same point here as well. So now there's a clear understanding between nature-based solutions and natural climate solutions. So great job, Natalie and James. Nature-based solutions are becoming more important for business. Good to know that there are so many resources to support us in the promotion and use of nature-based solutions. Yes, absolutely. That's a really good point. As you can see, there's also lots of case studies available. I saw that some of you guys were actually also sharing other platforms with case studies that you're aware of. So do continue sharing other useful resources you know. Links and information about reports and resources on the topic, very useful for further communication with stakeholders. Nature solutions can solve climate, nature, and social health issues. Now, how can we invest in the right ones that do exactly that? This is what we'll be addressing actually in the third workshop. How can we ensure that there's the financial means put into these solutions? It was great to see that there are already some projects and initiatives that are taking into account nature and climate change. I'm still trying to reflect on CSR vs greenwashing. Great. Okay, it's such great answers there already. Thank you so much, guys. And so actually, we're going to go to the next question, which I now want you to reflect on. Okay, based on your key learning, based on everything we've heard today, what is going to be your next small practical action that you're going to take, whether it's within your organization, whether it's with colleagues or even outside personally? What are you going to actually take and actually concretely do in terms of next action on nature-based solutions? And it can be as simple as I'm going to share my key learning with a colleague tomorrow when I meet with them. Make changes in strategy of my business. Wow, that's already quite a deep action, an extensive one. So that's great to hear. Read all the reports shared today and use them in my meeting. Language and pitches with team and stakeholders. That's really good to hear. Yes, hopefully we have given you some good pointers, whether it's in terms of useful resources, but even the language that you can use also to pitch the message to a business audience. List our various nature-based solutions projects that can be taken up. I'm going to share my learning with my friends and community, integrate it into my professional practice, and attempt to educate and share the learning about this webinar with the team. Super. Well, this is great actions, guys. Don't hesitate to continue sharing. Ooh, there's even one that's going to do a case study in mangrove restoration in Sudarban. Well, we would love to hear about that case study you'll be working on. Great, thank you so much, guys, for sharing. Let me get back to my slides now, and we're going to wrap up this first workshop. So I'm going to quickly hand over to Natalie, who's going to give some of the final practical information to listen into after this workshop.
Thank you, Katja. So you can receive a certificate by participating in this webinar, but we'll ask you also to complete a short quiz. Now, it is a short quiz. It'll be multiple choice. This will also enable us to get your email to be able to send you a certificate. So it is important if you would like a certificate of participation. I will ask maybe John to put the link in to the quiz. Also to know that if any of your colleagues or anybody you know want to watch this again, if you they can watch it. It'll be on the We Value Nature platform, and they can also receive a certificate of participation by completing the quiz. So there are lots of options for people to review this webinar. And if you see all of the webinars, you will receive a further certificate. And so I would like to thank you for attending the workshop and hope to see you on the 24th of June for the next one. And once again, please don't forget for the certificate. And a final mention, what I would like to say is that if you really are inspired to learn more about nature-based solutions for disaster and climate resilience, you can check out, we have a short course online that is free at pedder.org/MOOC. It's a 3 to 6 hour course that you can take at your own pace, developed by Pedder and many of the people involved in today's workshop. So that's also available to you. It goes more into depth, a lot more case studies, and a lot more reports for you to take into account.
Super, thanks so much, Natalie, for this last practical information. One other point for me to add, we'd love for you to take 1 minute to complete our feedback survey on this workshop. It will help also ensure that we improve the next 2 ones to come, and Paul will send the link to the survey in the chat right now. So this just leaves me to say again, a huge thanks obviously to our speakers today for their time and great presentation, and obviously a huge thanks to all of you guys for joining us today. We hope this was useful, and tune in for the next workshops to come. Thank you everyone, and speak soon.